class 90 on the Golden Doves, Chol HaMoed Pesach, and I want to continue on page 47. Okay, so we're on page 47. We shall now review some of the points discussed before. So this will, tie up some of the material that we've been studying. Speech is both the grounds of isolation and the means by which isolation is resolved. So I think what my father means by that is, because I speak, I view myself as a subject, as separate from the world around me, as separate from the other people around me. I can say the word I. So by saying the word I, that structures in the mind the concept of I. A monkey can never say I, an animal can never say I, and therefore they don't have that sense of isolation that human beings can have, right? And I think the glare, maybe there's a different angle. Well, okay, I think this is fine. Okay, so continuing. And also it's through, so it's oddly enough, it's because of speech that there is a sense of isolation, but it's also through speech that the isolation is resolved. Well, on the one hand, I say I and I feel isolated. I feel myself as an I, right? Separate from everything else. But on the other hand, through speech, I can resolve that isolation by speaking to a you, right? And then he speaks to me, right? The perception of I, from the perspective of the first person, is the effect of speech, of course, right? When the speaking subject posits himself as an I, right? It's at that moment that you feel your I-ness, if I can use that word. This perception is internal, right? And therefore hermetically closed in a twofold direction to the outside. It's hermetically closed to the outside in the sense that obviously you can never penetrate my I-ness, as we said previously, right? And it's a twofold direction. I can never penetrate your I-ness. On the other hand, subjectivity is a condition of perceiving the other as an object. Now, also, precisely because I feel my own subjectivity, I also can look at a person and see the person as an object, right? As a third person, rather than as a person with whom I'm having a dialogue. So I can also do that. So through my subjectivity, I can close myself off from other people and view them as an object, perceive them as an object. As students of Husserl recognize, subjectivity is contemporaneous with objectivity. So Husserl was the father of modern phenomenology. And basically what phenomenology says is, unlike Greeks who like to think of abstract ideas as an abstract world out there, or for example, there's an abstract thinking out there, so I can think abstractly, right? So there's abstract thinking. And in phenomenology, there is no abstract thinking, but rather there is thinking about something. So my consciousness is always going to be directed at something outside of me. So I can think about something as an object. So I can think about, for example, I'm looking at the grass now. So I'm thinking about the grass. So that grass exists in my mind. And in phenomenology, it's a twofold thing. So there's a mental construct that allows me to view that greenness, and I see it as grass, right? So that's a mental construct. But the grass really does exist. There is an objective reality to the grass. So it's not like in Greek metaphysics where things just kind of exist out there and there's like an actual, beauty out there. There's an actual justice out there. Things just exist abstractly outside the human mind. So in phenomenology, things exist independently, yes, but there is also a mental construct that allows the human mind to perceive these things. There's an interaction between the subjectivity, the mental construct of the person observing the object and the object itself. So while the object has a reality, the way I perceive that reality is based on my mental constructs. And that's the idea of intersubjectivity. It's because there's a bunch of people who look at that green thing and we all agree, oh, that's grass. We call it grass, right? So that creates the mental construct through which we perceive grass. We can see maybe different types of plants there. It's not just all technically grass, but we call it grass. That's the lawn, right? So let me read the thing about Husserl. As students of Husserl recognize, subjectivity is contemporaneous with objectivity. It's only when there is objectivity, and therefore my mind can focus on something, that's what creates my thought, right? If there was no outside world, I would have nothing to think about. So says Husserl. So it's through the outside world that the subject is now created, because he lives in opposition to that world which is outside of him, to which he's creating, which is directing his attention. So it's kind of like almost a dichotomy of sorts. On the one hand, he recognizes the outside world is outside of him, it's not him. On the other hand, if it wasn't for the outside world, he would have nothing to direct his consciousness towards. And it goes the other way around. The outside world is itself affected by the subjectivity of the person looking at the outside world, which has a mental constructs through which to perceive the outside world. So that's why subjectivity is contemporaneous with objectivity. And therefore, with intersubjectivity, as noted, I perceive that grass not just because I have a mental construct in my mind that perceives that as grass, but it's the intersubjectivity. There's different subjects that all say, yes, that's grass. We look at that, that's grass, right? Which is the very basis of linguistic communication. And of course, if we didn't have that intersubjectivity, we could never talk. I'll say, pass me the mustard. You want to know what I'm talking about. What is mustard, right? Pass me the salt. I want to eat bread. That's grass. What's grass? The mind can construct different things, right? We decided to choose to call that grass, and we decided to say the whole greenness over there is just grass, right? So we're not looking at the individual strands, for example, or we're not looking at the various different types of plant life there, right? We're just looking at the greenness, and we're referring to that as grass. That's the choice. That's intersubjectivity. But that's the basis of linguistic communication. Unlike sight, which is perceived as in the world out there, and the purely internal feelings that are experienced in the world within, hearing, so that's the world. So we speak about simultaneous synthesis. So I perceive the grass. Because I perceive the grass, my consciousness is directed at the grass. Because my consciousness is directed at the grass, at the intersubjective level, we all recognize it as grass, and therefore we can speak. That's done. So that's one thing. Now we have sight. Sight is always perceived as the world out there, right? And then we have the world within, right? Which is my thoughts. Okay. Hearing is an auditory phenomenon in the world out there, experienced in the world within. Hearing functions as the nexus between human interiority and exteriority, because through hearing I can listen to language and to speech, and that creates a bridge between your subjectivity and my subjectivity. That's the intersubjectivity, where we share common signs, semantic signs, right? We have a common semantic system through which we express ideas and share ideas, right? So that's hearing. That's why successive synthesis is so important, because successive synthesis allows for linguistic communication and therefore allows for intersubjectivity. The self is not only totally vulnerable to sound, but through auditory speech, reflexive experience is realized. Upon hearing oneself talk, the interiority, exteriority of the I is simultaneously experienced. So I'm quiet. Say something to yourself. As you say something to yourself, you're experiencing your own interiority. For example, you can say, I'm excited. I'm happy. This is amazing, right? So your interiority through the speech is becoming exteriorized, right? Presence is thus realized, and then you're aware of your own presence, right? So your presence is realized through your speech. Speech and language cannot be understood in terms of their respective functions. The function of speech is presence. As I speak, I am present, and I am asserting my presentness. The function of language is representation. Language is not speech. Remember we said the difference between lang and parole? So language is the entire system that allows for speech, but it's not itself speech. So language allows for representation. The word grass represents that grass. Presence and representation are mutually exclusive, right? So those two things are exclusive. If you have language, at that moment, you have a representation. If you have speech, at that moment, you have presence. But the presence reflects the interiority, while the speech reflects the exteriority. I'm sorry, I misspoke. The presence, the speech, represents interiority. The language, it's representing exteriority. So there are two, in a sense, exclusive or mutually exclusive ideas. Presence is experienced in the dialectic reality of person, right? Dialectic in the sense that the person is aware that he's different and separate from everyone and everything else. It is experienced in the art of speech when the ego establishes subjectivity and he says, I, right? Or I am happy, right? I don't care what's happening in the world. I am happy, right? So he's pushing out the rest of the world, right? The rest of the world can be a mental institution and he's still happy, right? The interiority of the speaking subject excludes representation. Representation here does not imply a distinction between effective and fictitious language, a representing or reproducing of presence in the Husserlian sense. Rather, it is meant as the articulation of that which is absent from the act of speech. Okay, we will continue next time on this.